So if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Ali Lucky, Senior Protective Service Worker at Mills, and I work in the ER.
Oh, great.
Response.
So you had a case recently in IRS that you used some of the tools on?
Yeah, I had a domestic violence IRS. It was a standby IRS, so it was after hours. And I used a lot of the tools, and it seemed to just from the beginning just really help build that relationship with the clients, so they felt comfortable and they felt like they could open up to me and trust that I was there to help them. It didn't really feel like it was an authoritative conversation or interview.
Sure. So did you say it was domestic violence, or what kind of what was the situation?
Basically, the situation is that this mother, she had a 10 or 11-month-old baby, and she's caught up in this cycle of domestic violence, coupled with just unable to break the relationship with the father of her child. It was going on for over 7 years. And he's been in and out of jail, for the domestic violence, but also for, violating the probation orders. During one of the times where he was released, she ended up having a child with him. Okay. Violating the orders, stay away orders, and then pretty much every time he would be released, she would go back to him. And so what happened this time is that she was meeting him for visits, taking her child to see him in a public place, and then they had an argument. He jumped in her car, drove off with the baby in the car. She reported it to the police, and then there was a high speed pursuit, and he was driving with the baby in his arms.
Oh boy.
And then he was in a 3-car collision, and the baby had injuries, and he fled the scene, and they still couldn't locate him. So he abandoned his child in the vehicle.
Okay.
And then the child was airlifted to Children's Hospital.
So I can see why it was an IRS. So what were some of the strategies that you used that really helped you to partner with the mom to start talking about safety?
Well, when I first went there, obviously her child was still in the emergency room, and they were still treating her child. I mean, she didn't have any life-threatening injuries, but she did. I mean, she was very lucky. Yeah. The mom was clearly upset, so when I first saw her, I just wanted to build rapport with her, ask her how her child was doing, and really empathize with her situation, because she was really afraid and really upset about what happened to her child. Sure. So I did that first, and it just seemed to really put her at ease that I was there to listen to what happened. Okay. So that's when we went into me asking her what happened. And so she told me, gave me a play-by-play of the entire incident. And then then we went into her history a little bit, and she kind of minimized some of the incidents that had happened before. But ultimately, what I asked her was, there were some questions here that I wrote down that I asked her that were really specific. I asked her if, why she was allowing her child to have contact with him despite, the history and the stay-away orders. And she said, because he's the father, and I want him to be able to see his child, and that he's never harmed the child before. So then that's when I asked her, well, were you ever worried that he would, when he's harming you, that your child could be hurt? And she said, I never thought about it like that. So just the way I asked her the question helped her to think about that. And then I went into a scaling question about from 0 to 10, what kind of pain are you in right now? What kind of pain has he caused you? Because she was crying, very upset. And she scaled herself at a 10. And so then I asked her, well, what got you to a 10? And she said, broke down crying that now her child's been, seriously injured. Then I asked her, well, have there ever been times where you're not in pain when you're in a relationship with him, when it's lower on the scale? Right. And she said, yeah, I've been a 0 before. And that's when I asked her, well, what got you to a 0? And she said, hugs and kisses. So then we started talking about the cycle of violence, And she was able to tell me, like, specifically, hugs and kisses, everything's fine, then there's an incident, I'm in a pain of a 10, then hugs and kisses. So we talked really a little bit about that, about the fact that that keeps happening, reoccurring in her life. So then I asked her if she thought that she would go back to him. And she said, absolutely no, you know. I said, well, what makes you think so confident that you're not, given all the times that you say you have? And she's like, oh, my child has been hurt. So then we talked a little bit about the cycle again, and I brought up substance abuse and kind of how people keep using despite all the wreckage it causes them in their life. And then that's when she told me that she thought she was addicted to him. And so that was huge, because I think she kind of had a moment of clarity. Yeah. And she started saying that it's crazy, that she doesn't know why she always returns. And so that's when she was starting to realize what behavior that she keeps doing over and over, like the insanity of it. Right. And then I asked her, then she said, this was the big one. So that's when we were talking about, I asked her, that's when she said that she doesn't know why, because she's such a strong person. So that was a red flag to me to ask, well, what's strong about you? You know, what are your strengths? What do you mean by that? And so then she told me, I'm independent and I have a job and I provide my child on my own and I have my own place to live and I don't need him. Right. But then I still always go back and it's crazy. And she's crying and crying. And so then I praised her for all that. You know, I praised her for all the things that were working well with her. And I think that made her feel good.
Do you, what do you feel about these lines of questions? What's different about these than before when you did interviews?
I think the lining of questions helps me stay organized with, like, it really keeps you in the order of events when you're interviewing a client about their life and about the situation they're in. And it's so more specific to help guide you versus robotic questions.
Did you feel like you got mom thinking?
Definitely. Because it's not so much the questions that you ask, it's kind of the way you ask them. It's more, I just got deep with her. I dug on the questions. And so it's kind of an order of events. It really is. Because after we talked about her strengths, we went into like what she's worried about. And that was the key to the entire night with her. I mean, I was with her like over an hour and a half. And she told me that she was worried it was going to happen again. You know, and she told me that she was worried he was going to find her. And then I did another scaling question because I wanted to know about returning again. Because I was really worried that she was going to return or she was going to allow herself to. So I asked her what she thought needed to happen, and she said she could protect her child and that she would leave where she was living to go live with her sister. But she didn't want to file for custody or anything like that. So then I asked her if she wanted to know what I was worried about. Because I let her talk so much. Sure. And so I asked her, do you want to know what I'm worried about? And she said yes. And I said that I was worried for her safety and her child, and that he's on the loose, and that he may find them, or she may allow herself to be found, and that they might be killed. And that's when she started crying again. And I said, so honestly, can you honestly tell me, are you worried about the same things? And she said yes, and she started crying. And so then that's when I had told her that I thought that what she needed is for me to help her protect her baby tonight. And of course she was devastated by that, but we really started talking about that just acknowledging that you need to change isn't enough right now, that we need to do some real therapeutic services to facilitate change, to actually show acts of protection, right? Like it talks about. Right. And so we talked about those goals, you know, in the goal statements that we were able to lay out together on what that would look like.
Wow.
You know, to return her child to her eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So
wow, it's beautiful work you did there.
I mean, I really feel like it takes a lot out of you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I was on my A game that night.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just really got down to earth with her and got some deepening questions, you know, and they just kind of flowed from there.
Yeah, I love it.
So
such good work.